Well, let me go ahead and say it. I just don't want the same kind of friends anymore. The same kind of friends that I had when I was 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50. I just like a different kind of person now, a different kind of relationship. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Morning routines can be a time to reflect on what makes us happy. A quiet cup of coffee, lighting a candle, picking up flowers from your local grocery store. One of the biggest challenges for many women is giving ourselves permission to want something different. It's not selfish, it's wisdom. You're not rejecting people, you're simply choosing relationships that reflect who you are now. It's helped me realize that I just don't want the same kind of friendships anymore.
We often don't stop to think about what we're feeling. We rarely take time to just focus on us. And the strange thing is that oftentimes nobody did anything really different. Many of us are just at a time of self-reflection. Life is a little more fragile. Time is a little bit more front of mind. We've got a little more time and we're using it differently. And so as a result, we start noticing things that we didn't notice before. Maybe judging situations a little differently. Maybe we don't have the bandwidth to get all involved in other people's business. And quite honestly, we all overuse the term friendship. So maybe we need to stop and look at it a little differently, because with age comes wisdom. And when we decide to prioritize the time that we have left, we start to discover that there's no time for the friend who only calls when something is wrong, the friend who dominates every conversation, the friend, I use it loosely, who leaves you feeling drained. She's always upset. She's always hurt. She's always sick. We start to realize that we no longer want those kind of people in our lives, at least as much as maybe they used to be in our life. We want to spend our energy in a place with people that fill us up. So today, let's get into it and let's talk about all that stuff that's causing us to shift, especially when we hit 50, and why it's actually a really healthy sign when you start to look at things a little bit differently. Nothing to be afraid of. So let's get started. Well, part one, I would say, is that quiet friendship shift. How do you recognize it? Well, I think something interesting happens as we get older. We begin to value peace. We begin to value quiet. We begin to value our health. Health plays a huge role in how we age. It plays a huge role in how our friends age. And we may not be in the same place as other people in our life. And the other side of physical health is, I think we really begin to hone in on how the people in our life make us feel physically, not just mentally, but physically too. And sometimes friendships that used to feel normal start to feel heavier, a little more anxious, anxiety. It can be weird. It can be confusing because you may have known these people for decades at this point. Maybe you raised your kids together. Maybe you worked together, volunteered together, were in the same organizations together. Maybe you shared holidays and family milestones together. So when something starts to shift inside you, I think our first instinct is to blame ourselves. Is something wrong with me? Why don't I want to spend time around her or him anymore? But most of the time what's happening is actually very simple. We're in a new stage of life. We've changed. Growth, aging quietly, changes what you're willing to carry. And honestly, it took us decades to get here. And in the meantime, we've watched our parents age, our siblings age, our grandparents age, our neighbors age. And so we have a point of reference and we can see what may be coming. I would also say that most of us women have played a role for many years. I think especially women, the dependable ones who spent a lifetime being the strong friend. Many of you are that person. You know, the one who listens, the one who helps, the one who smooths things over when there are disagreements, the one who shows up, the one who always raises their hand first when everyone else disappears. And if you're anything like me, and I know we've talked about this on the channel, you know, being that person probably started early, like me. You may have been the oldest child, or you may have been brought up in a family where you needed to take on responsibilities. Maybe you had a lot of younger siblings, but you learn early to be the responsible one, the one that learns very quickly how to take care of others, how to be there for others. And we carry that role then into our womanhood, and it becomes part of our friendships. It becomes who we are, our definer. You know, we become the fixer, the listener, the reliable one to all of our friends. And for years, you know, I've said it before, I think it made me feel good. It made me feel needed because feeling needed was meaningful. You know, it gave me a definition. But now something started to happen. I don't want to be that person anymore. I get tired. I'm not bitter or angry about it. I'm just tired. And honestly, I realize I've been doing a lot of things for people that didn't deserve all my attention. And so one day you notice, you realize it, and once you see it, it's hard to unsee it because you've spent a lot of time being a certain person for the people in your life. And maybe not everyone has been there for you in the same way. And that's understandable. We're all different. You know, some of us can handle more. Some of us, you know, are only comfortable handling just a little bit. But that awareness, when we finally see it, will never go away because you'll start to see the dynamics of your friendships very clearly. And you realize once you see it, like I said, you'll never look at it the same again. And you start to see the patterns. You play little games like, well, if I don't call her, I wonder how long it'll take for her to call me back. And next thing you know, they only call when they need something. They never ask about your life. What are you going through? How are things? You know, they just expect emotional labor from you. And the hardest realization of all, at least for me, was realizing that some friendships were built because of the role that I played and not who I actually was. So when you start changing your role in your family and friend circle, it's going to feel super awkward, super uncomfortable. You may even feel like you're doing something wrong. But if you give yourself a little grace and a little time, you'll get over that scary feeling and you'll start to realize that just because a friendship's history runs deep, it may have become a habit rather than something you truly enjoy. And I think we do get to the stage where we don't want the same kind of friendships anymore. And not because we've become difficult. Well, you know, maybe a little difficult. When friendship history runs deep, it's really hard to make any changes. We like when things stay the same. But not wanting the same kind of friendship anymore doesn't mean that you've become difficult. It usually means you become more self-aware. We're not just getting older, we're getting wiser. And you start wanting something different. You start craving something different in this season of life. Something that's less dramatic, maybe less obligations, less emotional caretaking, not putting up with what you don't want to put up with. You want to be more at ease, more mutual give and take, shared curiosity, respect for each other's energy and each other's boundaries, quite honestly. Friendships where you don't have to perform a role. You get to be yourself, and your friend respects who you are, and the people in your life, even your friendly acquaintances, respect who you are. And you find that you start leaving time spent together feeling relaxed instead of drained. And it's really interesting because I find that these kind of friendships often aren't the ones we built in our 20s and 30s, although I give some of you in our community have had good friends for 3, 4, 5 decades, and that's so admirable. But for most of us, our friendships were built later in life. And I think we take for granted that when we meet somebody in their 60s, well, how much could change? Well, let me give you a crazy example. So let me share kind of a crazy situation as we get older. What gets older too? Our pets. I was speaking to a friend who shared a crazy story with me. Her mom had a best friend. Both were dog lovers. As a matter of fact, that's how they met each other originally, was at a dog park. And I know we have many dog lovers on this channel. I had, many of you were, shared your condolences a couple of months ago when I lost our 14-year-old Rottweiler, Emma. And Emma came everywhere with me. And what's interesting is when we got Emma, we were in our 50s. We were in our 50s when we got, young 50s when we got Emma. And the breeder told us, Rottweilers, everyone's afraid of Rottweilers. So what you need to do is take her with you everywhere while she's a puppy and really get her acclimated to loud noises, to people touching her, to kids reaching out. So we took her to Home Depot and the bank and outside patios of local restaurants. And when I was mayor, she even went to City Hall. Emma knew everyone and Emma loved everyone. But I'll be honest, everyone who came into my house was afraid because I had a Rottweiler. So fast forward, you're 70 years old and you have a friend who has a dog who's now an elderly dog with all their aches and pains and maybe the arthritis. And there are dogs that get a little weird when they get really old. They get persnickety. Some get angry. Some are in a lot of pain or have arthritis and they're just grouchy. But imagine going to see this old friend with her now very old dog, and the dog has control of the apartment. The dog is mean, angry, scary. And what does the friend do? Well, she shoves the dog into the bathroom where it claws at the door, where it barks, and where it cries until the visit is over. Now, honestly, how can you enjoy a cup of coffee or a cup of tea if you have a dog that is so antisocial that your friends, new and old, feel uncomfortable coming to visit you? It's a real dilemma, but owners of dogs have to be responsible for what our dog can and can't tolerate, especially as we get older. And sometimes it's just you and your husband or just you with this animal you've had in your life, this animal you love dearly. But maybe it's just the three of you or just the two of you, and you've let the dog kind of have the run of the house. What I would say is do not expect your friend to just go along with this dog who now is maybe even dangerous, but at the very best, scary to you. No one wants to be clawed by a dog, accidentally or on purpose. No one wants to be in a room or an apartment or a house with a dog who they can't trust. And as we get older, how able are we to handle that dog? And it can be a teeny dog, or it can be my 14-year-old Rottweiler who was an angel. But when people came into my house, I found myself making all these excuses because, oh, don't worry, Emma's lovely. You know, when people came in that didn't know us, didn't know her. I've had work people refuse to come into my house because I had a Rottweiler. Think about what's changed for you and maybe your elderly dog, your elderly cat. If you're living with a testy animal, you don't want to be inviting friends in when they quite naturally would feel uncomfortable. So when I talk about friends changing, it can be a bigger issue. You know, the gal that was talking to me said that it came to the point where her mom could no longer visit her friend, and her friend wasn't willing to change up their schedule. She wanted to play cards and have tea at her home. But this gal's mom was coming home just layered in anxiety because of this Cujo that was in the bathroom. The dog was uncomfortable. The visitor was uncomfortable. It was a horrible situation. So lots of things can change. We get older. Sometimes we get really set in our ways. And pets, as much as we love them, sometimes we make bad decisions that, again, could put someone in a precarious situation. None of us want to spend stressful time with a friend, especially if we know before we get there that there's going to be something stressful going on. You know, we've lived too many years to put up with the things that we really just don't want to put up with. So what do we do as we are transitioning these friendships? Because often there's a period of time when you're just not comfortable with those old friendships, but you don't have new ones. You haven't figured out where your new spot is. And this is a space where and when many women start to worry if they're being too picky. Are they isolating themselves because they're afraid to start again? And they start challenging themselves, saying, well, friendship is just harder when you're older. But honestly, when you reset your standards, you make things easier for yourself in time. You do have a temporary gap, but that's when you spend time on your own. You find jobs around the house. You take the time to do nice things for yourself. You go out and eat by yourself or go have a cup of coffee by yourself. Transitions are tough. They're scary at any age. I bet every one of you remembers being the new kid in class at least once in your life. Don't let your fear of those in-between times paralyze you into sticking with friendships and situations you're not comfortable with. Use that time as a time to pour into yourself, because you're wise. If you sense something has changed, if you're not feeling it, you're probably right. And making this one change can lead to something so much better. Maybe quieter friendships, deeper conversations, more authentic connections that kind of center around the new you. You know, those times when people just show up to spend time together without baggage or without expectations. So if you're in that in-between space right now and it feels a little uncertain, you're not alone. There are many women here in this community going through the same thing, and drop a comment. Share what you're going through. And I know many of us will be able to help you. Now, the next video, we're going to talk about something that happens after you realize that, hey, I got to deal with these changes. You've got to change your role in the friendship. How do you do it when everyone likes the old you and doesn't want to accept the new you? What happens when people expect that old gal, the one that doesn't exist anymore? How do you get to keep growing and keep the people that are important to you? Not everybody gets to come along for the journey, but often there are many people in our life that we want to join us, but we want them to accept the new us. Well, I look forward to hearing your comments. I look forward to seeing you next week. I hope each of you is doing really well and feeling good, feeling healthy. Take care. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Flowers.